Welcome to the Coach Santiago Podcast, where Coach Santiago shares his expert knowledge of athletic development, coaching tips, advice for parents of athletes, and how you can turn your passion for the sport into your business. Coach Santiago has over a decade of experience and has worked with over 2,500 athletes with programs generating over $10 million in sales and $2.5 million in college scholarships since 2003. We hope you enjoy each episode, and remember, coaching is an action, not a position.
All right, guys, Coach Santiago welcoming you to another episode of Coach Santiago Podcast. Today we're talking about something that very near and dear to my heart, and not because I did this right, but because I did this wrong. And I understand the pain that this will bring, the emotional pain that this will bring if it's not handled correctly. The subject matter of today's podcast is about dreaming big, and understanding that you have two choices. You can either dream big or you might as well go home. And what do I mean by that? Several athletes that I've coached, several athletes that I've come across, when I ask them about, their athletic dreams, they'll say something like, well, I want to be a varsity all-conference player, or I want to be a person that plays in college, or I want to, be a starter on my travel team. And not that there's anything wrong with these level of goals, because they're good goals to have. The problem is that, generally speaking, human behavior, right, especially for high-performance people, which I think all athletes are wired, especially if you're a real athlete. If you're a real athlete, you are wired to be a high-performance person. You have to have the proper level of motivation to get to those goals. And the thing you want to do when you get to those goals is you want to get to those goals with enough steam behind you that you can continue to move forward. And I live this mistake personally. For those of you who don't know my personal story, I come from the inner city of Cleveland, Ohio. Me and my dad lived in a single bedroom apartment. It's probably about, 600 square feet in a very bad area of Cleveland. Several, acts of random violence that I had to witness growing up, and I grew up with a lot of people who weren't working and living off the government, and just some bad folks that were out there, or selling drugs or doing drugs or whatever the case might be. A lot of drama was going on. Two of the buildings that were right behind me were abandoned, boarded up buildings. So it was a really bad part of town. Not a very good place. Not a very good place to have dreams and aspirations of any stretch of the imagination. So with that being said, as I began to get older, and for those of you who've heard my story, have been to my website, if it wasn't for a scout from the Cincinnati Reds that saw me and told me I could do this thing called baseball at a high level, maybe I don't get out of that situation, because he saw something in me that I didn't really see in myself. But the bottom line is, when I finally got to the place that I said, okay, I do want to get out of here, and I do want to move forward, and I do want to have a better life, I simply said to myself, I want to play professional baseball, because that to me was so removed from anything that I was even remotely close to. It was the dream. And so that got me out of bed early, made me stay at practice late, made me stay positive when there were some things going on around me that would make it very easy to not stay positive. I think that this situation that I had to face on a day in, day out basis probably would have crushed the dreams of many people who were going into their sophomore year or junior year pursuing something. They would have said, there's no way I'm going to get out of here. We've got no money. We've got no future. And I'm not even safe in my own home. But because my dream was to play professional baseball, it just kept me going. And I remember taking that dream into my first and second year of junior college, and And I was obsessed with it. I mean, I would live at the ballpark. I would live in the weight room. Because I just had to do this thing. And so, fortunately for me, the baseball gods blessed me. And they gave me the opportunity to play professional baseball for the Cincinnati Reds. And I remember signing that contract and thinking about some of the things that I had to go through just to get to that point. Things are moving really, really quickly. But what I realized 3 or 4 seasons later, after I got to know some big leaguers and hang out with some major league players and do some things, was that passion wasn't there anymore. And, this happens very naturally. If anybody out there is listening is a former professional ball player of any sort, when it becomes your job, it becomes a little bit of a different situation. You get exposed to the business end of it, and it's a little bit of a different journey. But the bottom line is I realized right about my 3rd or 4th year of being a professional athlete that I didn't have the same fire I had in college. And I remember looking back at my college days and saying, man, those are some really awesome days and some really happy days. And I loved that time. But what I also remember is the fact that I did tell myself that I just wanted to play professional baseball. And so I had already reached, unknowingly to me, my goal. And I hadn't pursued Major League Baseball with the same level of commitment, passion, energy, focus that I did just getting to that professional level. And so I say all that to say this. One of the biggest regrets I have in life, and they always say regrets are the worst thing in the world to live with. I think there's some worse things to live with than regrets. I think sometimes you have to learn through regret. But the bottom line is I need to be thinking about playing 15 years in the big leagues. That should have been my goal. My goal should have been being a Hall of Fame catcher, being a 3 or 4 or 5-time world champion. Because when you dream big enough, it gives you that level of fuel, right? I mean, if you're in a car and I'm trying to drive from Cleveland, Ohio to California, I've got to have a lot of fuel to get to that level. Where if I'm going to from Cleveland, Ohio to Columbus, I don't need a full tank of gas. And so essentially emotionally for me, and emotion is huge, right? Emotion, mental health, mental awareness, mental vigor. I didn't have enough gas. And that's why my professional career did not end up being something where I was a major league ball player. So it was something I learned. And the reason I share this is so that if you have a player who's growing up right now in your household, or if you are that player listening to this, you need to dream big. You need to really, really push the levels of yourself mentally and push the level. Don't just say, I'm going to go play varsity baseball. And then when you get there, you're like, oh, well, now I want to readjust it and play college. Well, it doesn't work that way. Generally, once you've left the docking station with your dream, generally it's very hard to reorchestrate that and take it 10 or 15 or 20 miles past the original destination. Is it possible? Absolutely. Especially if you get the right influences at the right time. However, not something that's likely, not something that is something that I would bank on. So my point and my direction and my guidance to you is that as you begin to look at yourself, and a lot of these kids coming up today don't have any goals at all. So number one, if you don't have one, sit down, get some. Everybody should have goals. Everybody. Short-term goals, intermediate goals, big-time goals, long-term goals. But have some goals, have some result-oriented activities you want to be doing, but just make sure that it's big enough, that it's so big that maybe it even scares you. Maybe it even, there's no way I could ever do that. But you think you can do that. And maybe you think that, you can do it, but it's just you don't see how the resources are going to be available for you to do it. Put it down on a piece of paper. Put it down on a chalkboard. Put it down on a white piece, on a whiteboard. Put it down on anything you want. Put it in your computer saver, your screensaver, whatever the case might be. But dream big enough so that when you finally get to those levels of success, you have enough gas in the tank to continue to push you forward. When you get knocked down, if you've got enough gas in the tank, you will get revved up and get right back up and going. But if the dream is too small, if the dream is too attainable, if the dream is just not big enough, you do run the very good chance that you may not enjoy yourself all the way when you get to the top, or if you get there, realize that you just set the bar too low and actually capitalize on that target goal. Les Brown, the great Les Brown, one of the greatest public speakers of all time, and just great motivators of all time, says it best. A lot of us don't have a lifetime of heartache because we set goals too high and miss. It's because we set goals too low and hit. So think about that as you're getting prepared for your next season, getting prepared to talk to your children about what they can do athletically and how they can use athletics to get to the next level of life that they want to pursue. Coach Santiago signing out. As always, remember, coaching is an action, not a position.